Vincent Berry II is a multi-talented individual who has established himself as a true Renaissance man. With a passion for music, entrepreneurship, and promoting African trade and cultural industries, Vincent has made a significant impact in various fields. Dedicated to enhancing trade and economic growth, his company, 22 Partners, focuses on empowering Africa's creative and cultural industries while fostering two-way trade between the African diaspora and African nations. Through initiatives such as the Intra-African Trade Awareness Campaign, titled You Never Know, Vincent collaborates with influential figures like Mayor Karen Bass, the Department of Commerce, and the State Department to create awareness, educate, and engage businesses and entrepreneurs about the vast potential of opportunities for trade and investment within Africa. He is our guest today. This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I'm your host, Ramses Ja. All right, Vincent Berry II. What a name. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
I'm phenomenal, bro. How are you, sir?
I'm thriving, sir. Excited to talk to you, man. You're doing some really cool stuff. So before we get to all that, tell us a bit about yourself. For folks that may not be familiar, a little bit about your background, your upbringing,
absolutely,
sort of what
man.
led you to 22 Partners.
Thank you, buddy. Well, you know, my when I think about myself, man, I went to Morehouse College, and there they helped to instill in us a legacy of being what we call a Renaissance man.
Okay.
One that wouldn't just be educated or one who dressed well or spoke well, but one who would encompass what they call the five wells. One who would be well-spoken and well-traveled, well-balanced, well-dressed, and well-read. And I have used this as a litmus test, if you will, as a compass, Ramses, for myself and my journey. While at Morehouse, I had the pleasure of leading several organizations. Was a e-board member of NAACP, e-board member of the Phi Alpha Delta Law Fraternity. Also was the president or basileus of the Psi chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated at Morehouse. And so have an opportunity to lead these young men who are all extremely ambitious, inspiring, aspiring, these gentlemen who aggressive and focused, brilliant. Having to lead that group of people really prepared me for my journey. And so while at Morehouse, a brief overview, when I think about areas of expertise, I focus mainly in music business, what we call creative Africa and cultural industries, intra-African trade, blockchain, Web3, NFTs, diaspora strategies, artist infrastructures, and mainly for a lot of people, access to capital. But while at Morehouse studying business administration and accounting, one of my professors introduced me to the value of intellectual property. He told me that the best thing you can own in the world is a song. And man, it was such a revolutionary conversation. I think we spent maybe 45 minutes on that conversation, Ramses. And after that, brother, I moved to LA literally the next day. I gave everything I had to my girlfriend at the time, TV, dressers, furniture, all of that stuff, and moved to LA. I moved to LA with 500 songs. But now with the empowered knowledge to know that every time I make a copyright, it's going to live in the world for over 100 years. And so now I'm thinking about the amount of people I'm able to empower and the amount of families I'm able to resurrect and to really help to be reestablished into a sustainable future, man. So I gave everything I had and dove deep into music. Ended up today I have 4,000 songs. So that kind of gives you how a picture, a gauge on some level, a quantifiable gauge of how hard I've been working over the last 10 years. And that was 2013. So from 13 to today, you know, you're talking about 3,500 songs. So that's almost, that's a lot of music, man.
Yeah, 10 years.
And it's been nonstop. And from those 4,000 songs, we've commercialized about 70 of them. 6 of which have been nominated for Grammys. I won my first Grammy with Beyonce in 2017.
Wow.
But we've also been nominated with the Dreamville, Revenge of the Dreamers, Part 3, J. Cole, uh, Ari Lennox, Omen, um, Ty Dolla Sign. I've also been nominated for 3 Grammys in the gospel genres. So Karen Clark Sheard, Kiera Sheard, and the James Fortune. Also nominated with a young lady named Antonique Smith for a song that I helped to create called Hold Up, Wait a Minute as an independent artist. That was for something we were really, really proud of as well.
Nice.
And then, we talk about creatively preparing to release my own music on the 11th of August, for the first time, stepping out from behind the scenes to actually putting out my own music. So we're doing a campaign where I'm putting out my music once a week, but, when you've created this music, you can create a system that functions by itself. And so while I have spent most of my time building in Africa over the last 3 years, I have this catalog that I've built that I can't just let sit and not be commercialized. And so we've built a model that allows us to commercialize that music while we're doing the work of connecting dots in Africa, man. So it's a beautiful serendipitous moment for me where it all comes together full circle.
Yeah.
Been able to, do really well for myself, millions of records, the process of selling one of my songs for over $250,000. I started with nothing, homeless in LA for 3 of those years, to being able to sell one song for anything over 6 figures is a dream come true. So
Sure, I bet.
I'm working, man. I'm grinding, and so ultimately, this beautiful music career that just blossomed out of nowhere gave me an opportunity for international influence.
Yeah, that's what I
And
was going
so
to ask
once I
about.
got this Grammy,
Uh-huh.
I went to China and India and Dubai, obviously Africa, and really going as a thought leader, as an influencer, as a tutor, if you will, to teach people how to do what I did for myself.
Okay.
But I did have this Morehouse business background. And so what it gave me was a perspective to be aware of opportunities, and then the boldness to strike when it's the right moment. And so I'm at a conference in Kigali, Rwanda, hosted by the African Export and Import Bank, and it's called the Creative African Exchange. And while I'm there on this, I'm there to teach people how to write songs. I've got a beautiful deck I've designed, but I got on this Adidas jumpsuit, Ramses, because I'm coming to a creative concert. I think I'm coming to Revolt Summit of Africa. When I get there, bro, it's like G20. It's really like the World Economic Forum for Africa. It's almost like Wakanda,
I like that.
the African Union, that kind of experience,
Yeah.
but earpieces, Secret Service, presidents, queens, crowns, all kind of stuff, and I'm realizing I'm not dressed for this room. And so I catch a taxi back to my hotel. It was about an hour, 15 minutes to change, hour back. About 2.5 hours, I'm gone just to make sure I'm prepared when I walk in this room because I'm so blown away. I walk in the room, it's 10,000 people, about 18 countries represented, and the bank president is up speaking when I walk in, and he highlights that, we are getting ready for our Intra-African Trade Fair 2020. And we realized from 2018, we did $32.6 billion in deals between about 1,100 companies in 7 days, but we did no deals with creators. And we gave no money to songwriters and producers and artists. And so this year we've put together a $500 million fund to invest in creative Africa and cultural industries. And at this point, bro, I blank out. At Morehouse, I remember a young man, he came to a speaking engagement and there were mics in the middle of the aisle. And he went to the aisle and stood at the mic and just waited for the keynote speaker to finish talking to be the first question. And it worked. He was the first question. He was standing there for 20 minutes. Everybody know he the first question.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the same thing in Africa, and I was the first question. And I think it's very important to strike. I think that's a lesson that I think many entrepreneurs throughout our nation really, I would love for them to get from my story. When the moment is right, you have to get up and say something.
Yeah.
And so I stood at this mic, bro, and regardless of the statement that I made a beautiful statement that was able to articulate to this bank that not only do I understand the power of this moment, I also understand the financial instruments that empower you to actually do what you just said you were going to do, right? So they've talked about $500 million facility to invest in creators, and I asked about what financial instruments that you use to make this money available. I spoke about letters of credit and SBLCs, which stands for standby letters of credit. I talked about bank guarantees or direct advances, even equity investments. Just trying to figure out if it's debt, equity. How are you going to make this money available to these kids who don't understand these instruments, right? And the president said, I never met a creator who understood financial instruments.
Okay.
And from that conversation, it opened a powerful door. Long story short, they sent me back to America as the United States Intra-African Trade Ambassador and on behalf of the trade fair. And
So
I went through America to try to get as many people to that trade fair as possible.
So that's what I was going to ask. What does that role entail? Intra-African Trade Ambassador.
Yeah, awesome. So the bank, well, started in 2019, the African Union, in partnership with the Afrexim Bank, and at this point, 54 African nations have come together to collaborate for the creation of what we call the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. And what it's done, Ramses, is created the largest free trade area in the world. You may be very familiar with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Area Agreement,
of course,
between Canada, America,
US,
and
Mexico.
Mexico. That exact same agreement virtually exists for every country in Africa.
Okay.
So you're talking about all 55 countries across the entire continental African borders, but also the African Union has detailed that this free trade area agreement encompasses what they call the 6 regions of Africa, the continent being divided into 5 regions, and that 6th region encompassing what is so remarkable, what we call the diaspora. What that does, there are African people, Black people all over this world, not just in every country on this planet. And so what that agreement really ultimately does is empower global Africa to participate in a new borderless Africa. And this is the narrative that we have been able to, the opportunity and the way that we've been able to voice that opportunity to help our people see, how pivotal this moment is.
So let me ask you this. Is that the goal? Is that the goal, you would say, of this effort?
Well, without a question. I mean, so the goal is we've put together intra-African trade affairs to promote this Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Okay. And so every 2 years we host a trade fair, and the goal is to facilitate 7 days of deal making, 7 days of matchmaking, 7 days of government engagement. Also, in addition to an exhibition floor where deals are happening, we also have 4 or 5 days of what we call the Trade and Investment Forum. And so we're bringing some of the biggest voices across Africa, banks, presidents, ministers of trade and industry, to actually speak to the people that come to this experience, as well as what we call the CANEX program, a Creative African Nexus, where we have a program dedicated to music, TV, film, fashion, art, dance, culinary arts this year as well. So you got a 3 days, essentially a creative conference, where it's music performances, filmmakers, film, what do they call it when we're viewing the film? I can't think
critics,
of it. It slipped my mind.
Producers, critics.
No, almost like Cannes Film Festival. Thank you. Okay. It's like a mini film festival, if you will. We give opportunities for filmmakers across the diaspora to showcase their work to our bank, right? My first deal that I did at this bank, we funded a company called AAA Entertainment based in South Africa. I was a part of helping to get them approved, but they ultimately got funded for $50 million for a slate of films to make films that highlighted Black Americans and Africans. And so ultimately, when you think about that deal, that's ultimately what we're here to do, is to facilitate deals between Black people, whether on the import side or the export side.
So that's what I wanted to talk to you about next, because obviously our listeners are primarily here in America.
Yes.
Why, in your own words, as an expert on this, why would you say it's important for Black American business owners to engage in economic relationships with African businesses?
Oh, very, 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 very. Thank you. First of all, I think that's a very important question. perfect segue into the mission, if you will.
Yeah.
When you think about intra-European trade, intra-European trade right now globally is about 54%, which means 54% of the time, European companies are going to do business with themselves. Intra-Asian trade, and that has nothing to do with the Europeans that do business with Asians. It's just intra-European trade, right?
Mm.
Intra-Asian trade is about 44% of the time Asians companies do business with themselves. When you think about intra-African trade, we're talking about a global 16% of the time.
Wow.
Black folk do business with each other. And so we're talking about less than 1/5 of the time. Out of 5 deals, out of 10 deals, less than 2 of them are going to go to another black company. On the reverse, in 10 deals, almost 6 of them are going to go to another European company in the European community. In my mind, we talk about the ability to circulate wealth, create wealth, sustain wealth.
Mhm.
Our ability to become sufficient autonomous as a people is fundamental to our ability to establish sustainable wealth. And so if we're talking about the future that's coming, right, where, many other races in the world have a declining reproduction rate. We talk about Africa in 2030, you're talking about a continent that will double in population size, right? So you're talking about by 2030, 3.5 billion people being on the continent, bro. This is very, very important data when you're talking about the future, right? You talk about 300 million people in America, and you're talking about almost 300 million people in Nigeria alone. It's a much bigger market. What it tells us, why should the Black American focus on this? One of my first meetings in Africa, the bank helped to give us data, to give us a experience of understanding who are the influencers over this massive market that's just been created by this free trade area agreement. And did you know the number one influencer on the African continent is the Black millennial American, bro?
Wow.
Very important data where you think about how we have business ideas, maybe products or maybe merchandise that you want to sell to a market. And you probably want to put yourself in a market where you have the best chance of being successful.
Sure.
And you're talking about a market, bro, that's almost 10 times the size of the US that we are virtually completely ignoring, right? By not even being exploratory as it relates to what's on the continent. And so when we thought about this intra-African trade awareness campaign, thinking about branding the name and what do we call it, you never know just made the most sense, right?
Yeah.
Because you never know what's waiting for you on the other side of that ocean if you don't go on the other side of the ocean. You never know what conversations and how fast something can evolve. I mean, there are 2 Americans on my board, myself and Steve Harvey. For me, that's another frat brother of mine, but that's a dream come true on many levels, right? To just be the voice of an entire group of people and not have to be a super celebrity to be in that position, right? But just a brother from this community who took an opportunity seriously, saw the moment, and who bit down on the moment, right? And what that means, Ramses, is actually serving for 2 years for free, right? I'm actually an goodwill ambassador, no money, right? Just you're an ambassador and they get to leverage all the things you've done in your industry and you can say you're connected to them. And I took that and I ran with it, bro. I treated it like it was a full-time job, brother. I went to every Black agency in America, every fraternity group, Howard, Morehouse, Harvard, FAMU, Harvard, Wharton, Yale, it don't matter. Purdue, USC, NYU, all over America, yelling and screaming about the opportunity to do business in Africa. And the bank saw that passion and said, hey, bro, we had a board seat saved for a celebrity we had in mind, but you're the energy that we need on this board. And so I'm about 20 years younger than all the other board members, bro. We went from a $500 million fund to last year being increased to a $1 billion fund. So when I stood up, bro, I didn't imagine that I would be on the board managing the money he's talking about. I literally just wanted to know, how do we access those resources? Sure. And then I wanted to connect the dots with everybody in my ecosystem. And I think that's where the power lies, realizing when you think about capital, thinking less about money and thinking more about resources is what I want our people to do more of. You probably have a lot more resources than you imagine when you think about human capital, when you think about intellectual capital, when you think about emotional capital, social capital. cultural capital, you probably are a lot more wealthier than you ever could imagine. And then leveraging those things to create sustainable opportunities for ourselves is what I'm about. So on this board, it's an unpaid position, but there's opportunity to facilitate deals. And so, we are not, our bank is not it's not a commercial bank. It's an export credit agency. It's a very different organization, um, focused solely in import and exports. And so when we engage companies, we typically engage companies with a vehicle on the continent, right? So you got to create a vehicle on the continent, and then you got to submit a business case, and that needs to be approved on every level. And then a investment strategy that needs to be approved on every level. Very simple. We're not working with companies as startups. We don't do any funding of startups. Um, Focusing on companies who are 3 years or more in the space, generating revenues, having revenues generated, but also more than just revenues, having material agreements in place with places across the continent. And if those don't exist, what we do is we help to, at 22, create those conversations for our partners.
We are here today with Intra-African Trade Ambassador and founder of 22 Partners, LLC, bridging gaps and fostering two-way trade between the African diaspora and African nations, the one and only Vincent Berry II. All right, talk to us about the governmental support that you've received for this effort, both from the U.S. side and the African side, because I know that that is very much intact for you.
Yeah, it's pretty dope, man. So, in Africa, what's dope is, this bank is not domiciled in any particular country.
Okay.
We have offices across the entire continent. And so there is no one government infrastructure that we are beholden to, which I absolutely love it. The opportunity to move across the border so seamlessly and freely because of Frexum's investment into the continent. And so when you think about COVID relief, we put up the $4 billion for COVID relief for the entire continent. Mm-hmm. You talk about the richest Black man in the world, Dan Gote, we are his leading investor and partner in his newest refinery on the continent. And so at the highest level of business, at the highest level of government, I've watched this bank create opportunities and relationships. I've met over 17 presidents, face-to-face meetings of presidents across the continent. Frexum I brought them a company called Amplify Africa, who hosts a conference called Africon, which is ultimately like a small version of our trade experience. Mm-hmm. We funded that experience here in LA. And with that funding brought us relationships with Mayor Karen Bass. And so this year at Africon, we brought the executive vice president of our bank to Africon as a keynote speaker. Her name is Kanayo Awani. And Mrs. Awani is, she's responsible for moving about $54 billion across Black companies in the last 5 years, bro. Just a dynamic sister. And she wanted to meet Karen Bass, Mayor Bass. And so the organizers helped to organize that conversation at the mayor's house. And while we were there, they gave her the microphone, man, and she began to talk about some of the work that we've been doing together across the diaspora.
I like that.
And what it did was it took work that's been done in darkness and silence, in the shadows, work that's just been done because of passion, and bring it to a forefront and put it on a platform and bring a spotlight to it. And what that spotlight did in just a 3-minute dissertation of some of the work that we've done together, Mayor Bass grabbed me, and she sent a deputy mayor of international affairs to grab me and to ask if Mayor Bass could celebrate me at the city council meeting, which was 3 days later from that moment. And we went to the city council meeting. She celebrated me and some of the work that some of the other LA-based companies were doing across the diaspora. And it was over about 11 o'clock, and they took me right into a meeting from 11 to about 3:30. And so for about 4 hours, we got a chance to really walk in through my experiences at the bank, how I got to that position, but more importantly, what our vision is for this trade awareness campaign. And we were able to garner that support. from the mayor's office in the city of Los Angeles. Ironically, on the way into that meeting, we meet a young lady right before that meeting, Malika Rufai, who's worked for the Department of State for a very long time. As we're going into that meeting, she hears us, we're talking, she joins the mission. She connects us with another young lady, Terry Batch, who is at the Department of Commerce, who, as we walking into that meeting, she joins the meeting as well. So
Snowball
we walk
effect.
into the mayor's office with the Department of Commerce, the Department of State. Now we've got, we've got the Development Collaborative at the Small Business Development Center, who's literally pledged their entire technical support infrastructure for free for our entire trade fair and trade mission. They've lined up so many grants for us, bro. You don't even know the amount of money that's built in to support this particular program. Ironically, Frexim Bank, our bank, and the U.S. Exim Bank has a partnership of about $500 million to instigate intra-African trade. This is from an executive order issued by President Biden that I didn't know existed, right? So I'm talking about a moment in time, really a divine moment in time, right? Where you think this economy is being shaken, and it is, but an opportunity is presenting itself to create global pipelines for ourselves, right? And for a Black entrepreneur who's sourcing all of his goods from Taiwan or all of his textiles from China, you now have a African Continental Free Trade Area agreement that virtually removes all of the taxes and tariffs that used to prevent us from doing trade and making it more expensive to do trade in Africa. Now it's cheaper to do business among ourselves.
That way.
And I think that's the incentive for Black Americans to get involved. It will be cheaper for you to do business using and leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement than it is for you not to use it at all.
I love this. This is magnificent. So, I don't want to keep the people waiting. So, talk to us about IATF 2023. From what I understand, 1,600 exhibitors, $40 billion worth of trade is expected to take place. Let's talk about it and obviously where people can go to learn more about it if they want to get involved.
Yes. So if you are in the U.S., we have a website called You Never Know. You Never Know, the word spelled out, YOU, never know, KNOW, 2023.com. You never know, 2023.com. You should also take a note of the intra-africantradefair.com, INTRA, AfricanTradeFair.com, intra-africantradefair.com. And what it does for you is walk you through the entirety of what we're expecting. I think it's important to note that whatever number of target number that we've ever put for our trade fair, we've exceeded it by at least 2 or 3%. So imagine saying we want 43 billion, but we end up doing $50 billion in deals, right? That's the kind of experience that I've witnessed at each one of these trade fairs. They're every 2 years. So if you miss this one, you have to wait to 2025, which is a long time away. I've seen companies get funded $50 million to assemble home appliances all the way across, building a dam or energy or lighting. I've seen every possible. I've seen a company made in Africa, Kojo Annan. Daddy was Kofi Annan. Kojo was awarded a $180 million facility to purchase a manufacturing plant in Ghana to build textiles in Ghana instead of China. Right. So I've seen so many different kind of deals across every possible vertical. I mentioned the deal with AAA already of what we've done there. We funded Steve Harvey and the content that he wanted to create in Africa, including Family Feud and some of the other platforms that he's created for himself. So many other partners, bro. So in my mind, finding companies, so this trade fair is really works across every industry that you could ever imagine, vertically agnostic, opportunities across the board. We have partners from, the government. So we're hosted in Cairo, Egypt this year. So our inauguration, the first day is being hosted by the president of Egypt. And you'll meet over 10 presidents from different African countries, ministers of trade and industry from every country in Africa. In fact, there's a Ministry of Trade meeting for those ministers at our trade fair. So bringing ultimately their entire small business administrative infrastructure right there at the conference. And I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of deals that can be brokered, and they're creating space for companies to do deals. And so we've partnered with the Department of Commerce, the Department of State, the what they call the STEP program is the State Trade Expansion Program, but it's grants that they have to pay for exhibition tables and exhibition space. And sometimes they pay for flights and hotels and room and board. And so they're putting together a suite of grants and programs and government funding so that any company throughout the U.S. who wants to participate in this trade fair, the government has resources to subsidize a lot of those costs. And so they're bringing a lot of that money up for us right now. So it's beautiful. A lot of the grants will be refilled July, August, September, October. A lot of the funds are actually being replenished right now. And so the timing is actually better than ever.
Well, it sounds fantastic, and I can't get enough of this. This is a very special thing that you're doing. Before you go,
Thank you, big brother.
I want to make sure that obviously you've plugged the event, but I want you to plug your own social media for folks that want to just tap in with you on this journey, and just keep up.
You, bro. Yeah, so my personal platform is Vincent Berry 2, and that's across every platform. VINCENT BERRY, the number 2, Vincent Berry 2. I am available to connect. Gentlemen, I want to say thank you. It means the world to me. You brothers are giants to me and so many other people. And so I'm grateful to share this moment with you, man.
You're far too kind. You're far too kind. But I do want to say this. I think, again, what you're doing is incredibly special. Obviously, you're living the sort of life that many people aspire to live, but you're showing that it's possible. Winning a Grammy with Beyonce and then affecting trade deals and managing and overseeing the expenditures of billions of dollars, and definitely shifting the focus on Africa and African and indeed African American enterprise. You're doing it on a massive scale, and I couldn't be more honored to have this conversation with you. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, our guest is Intra-African Trade Ambassador and founder of 22 Partners, LLC, bridging gaps and fostering two-way trade between the African diaspora and African nations, the one and only Vincent Berry II.
Thank you, sir.
This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show was produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I'm your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.